Hey Sprite fans, Scott from Sprite Profs here, and today we're going to be looking at using a Sprite video player to create a haunted moving portrait using a wireless trigger to activate. We're going to kind of take this step by step. So we'll start with looking at the Sprite player, looking at how you get your video files onto the Sprite and set them up so that they'll play when triggered. And then we'll take a separate look at the wireless trigger part of this. All right, so this is the Sprite video player here, and you can see it's a small unit. It has a couple USB ports here on the front. This is the IR receptor for the remote for this, which allows you to kind of change the settings and stuff like that. And then the micro SD card slot here, and our files are on there. We'll take a look at that in a second. On the back, you can see we have our power. We have an HDMI out. There's also an optical audio out and a standard AV out. And then there's the I/O plug here. It comes with this adapter, and this is what we're going to use to actually plug the wires in from our wireless remote to activate the triggered video when we want it to play. So the first part of this is going to be getting our video files onto our SD card. So to do that, we're going to go over to the PC. We can take our SD card out here. And we'll bring this over to the PC, put it in, and I'll show you how we load the files.
All right, so here we are over at the computer, and we're going to load our video files onto the Sprite. So I have two windows open here. This one is just our folder containing our video files, and we're using a video called Unliving Portraits from Atmos FX. And when you open that up here, you're going to see all of the different video files that come with that bundle. This window is my SD card. So I have that inserted into my SD card reader. So it's USB drive E, and that is open here, and it's empty right now, as you can see. So what we're going to want to do is select two files. The way the Sprite works is that it can have a looping file, and then you can have a trigger file. And it works really well with these videos specifically because they have what they call buffer files, which are just static images, essentially, of the portrait. And then they have an animation. And because the Sprite can do the seamless looping, it will blend one into the other seamlessly. Okay, so let's go ahead and select our video. For this demonstration, I'm going to be using the little girl video. So we're going to be opening up this folder. And you can see there's a bunch of different options in here. This is what's cool about the Atmos FX videos, is that they come with a lot of different versions. So we're going to look for the TV no frame vertical orientation, because this is a portrait. And we're going to open that up, and you can see there's a number of different files in here. This is the buffer file. So this is actually, and we can preview it here, just essentially a static image. You can see it's playing, but there's no movement to the video. And then you have two options for scares, sort of. This one is just kind of a subtle eye movement. And we're not going to be doing that because we want something a little bit more scary. But that you could use that if you wanted to just have something a little more unnerving and less deliberately frightening. We're going to be using this one here, the nightmare version. So let's preview that. So yes, very scary and cool looking. And you can see that the orientation here is in a vertical format. So it looks like it's tilted to its side, but when we put that on the video player, we can then turn the video player screen, that is, over 90 degrees clockwise, and it will look correct. So let's get these files onto the SD card for the Sprite. What we're going to do is just drag them over. So I'm going to take the buffer file, drag it over here, and it will copy over. And then I'm going to take my scare file and also drag it over. So these need to be named properly for the Sprite in order to recognize them. So for our looping file, we want to take that. We can right-click, and we can rename that to 000.mp4. Now the Sprite will know that that is our looping file. Our scare file, we will want to rename to 001. And that's it. So these are right in the root of the SD card. They're not inside a folder or anything like that. And just because they're named this way, the Sprite will look for those file names. It will play the 000 file as its looping file and the 001 file as its scare file, essentially, or its triggered file. Depending on if you're using an adapter that has multiple inputs, you can add more different triggered files for different inputs. But we're just doing one right now, so this will work for us. I'm going to go ahead and eject the SD card, and we will bring it over to the Sprite player and get it set up.
All right, so now that we have the files loaded, we can go ahead and put them onto the player. You can see here that I already have the HDMI out connected to the input of our little screen here. I also have the power turned on and power to our screen. So we can go ahead and load our prepared SD card into the SD card slot on the Sprite. And once it's inserted, you'll see the TV will start to play our looping file. And then when we trigger it with our wireless remote, which we'll set up in a moment, it will play our scare file. All right, so let's take a look at the wireless relay part of this. This is the actual 1 relay wireless module. We do have also a 2 relay, a 4 relay, and a 12 relay, but we only need 1 output to trigger the single input of the Sprite here. So this is where the actual relay is. It's in this little black box, and you can go ahead and open that up, and you'll see the circuit board for the relay itself. To access that, you just remove it from the box, and then we can place it here and put this to the side. The wireless relay will also come with a remote here. Those will typically have an extending antenna and then also a kind of gate that comes down so you can access the button. It is always important to check to make sure you have a battery in the remote. Sometimes they come with them and sometimes they don't. If you hit the button and you see a red LED come on, then you should have a battery and a working remote. I'm going to turn off our video screen here. That way we can concentrate on the remote itself. So the first thing that we need to do is provide power for our wireless relay module here. And one of the questions I get most often is how can you tell what's what on this circuit board here with these screw terminals? So those are usually labeled on the reverse of the circuit board. And you can see here that we have a negative voltage, positive voltage, the NO terminal of the relay, the COM terminal of the relay, and the NC terminal of the relay. The way that this works is that you have to power the unit on with 12-volt power right here. And then you have your 3 relay terminals. And the normally closed terminal will be connected to common by default. And then when we activate the relay, it's going to switch, connecting common to normally open. This will not provide any voltage, so that's why we can use it to trigger a Sprite. We're just going to wire from common and NO to the 2 terminals on the Sprite, and we'll show you that in a bit. So first things first, we need to get power going. Now I happen to have a 12-volt power supply coming in from off screen here. And this is something people run into a lot too. They have the barrel plug, they have the circuit board, and it doesn't work. So I'm going to show you one way to get around that. We do sell adapters that you can wire into here that have a female barrel plug that you can plug into, but you don't necessarily need that. One thing you can always do is just cut the barrel plug off of your power supply. And then strip the outer shielding away. And that will give you access to the 2 wires that are running inside of this outer shielding. Now we can strip those. And we can wire these now into the terminals for positive and negative voltage on the wireless remote. Red will be positive, black will be negative. I'll go ahead and put the negative here into V minus and tighten that down. And the positive is right next to it there. So we'll go ahead and insert that. Tighten that. And that should power on the relay. Now the next thing that you need to do is make sure that the relay is set to the correct mode and paired with the remote. So to do that, we're going to go ahead and hit this white button 1 time. The LED will flash and then turn on and stay on, and then we're going to hit the button on the remote 1 time as well. Now the relay has been synced to the remote and also set to momentary mode. So the relay will activate and stay activated for as long as I hold this button down and then turn off when I let go. If you wanted to set this relay to toggle mode, you would just hit this button 2 times. You'll see again, now the LED stays on, then you hit the button on the remote. And now this is set to toggle mode, meaning that if I hit the button once, the relay will stay on until I hit the button again. Those are the 2 modes that you're most likely to use with this remote. So let's go ahead and set it back to momentary. We'll hit the button once, LED will flash, then turn on. We'll hit the button on the remote, and now we're back to momentary mode. So the next thing we need to do is wire this wireless relay to the input of the Sprite. And in order to do that, we're going to be using the terminals of the relay. So as we discussed earlier, NC and common are connected by default, and then when it switches, it's going to connect common to NO. That's going to close the circuit. You can think of it sort of like a light switch, but rather than you toggling it physically, the electronics of the relay board are doing that. So what we're going to do is we're going to get a piece of wire here. This is 22 gauge, 2-strand wire, and we're going to wire from the NO and the common terminals of this relay to the input on the Sprite here. So let's do that first, and then we'll look at what the Sprite input looks like. And it doesn't matter in this case which wire goes to which. There's no voltage or polarity going on here. We're just literally touching these two wires together. So you can use any color wire you want, and it can go into either terminal, NO or COM. Doesn't really matter. All right, now we can set that aside for a second. And next up, we'll be looking at the connection for the Sprite. So like I mentioned before, we're going to be wiring to 2 terminals here on our input adapter. And hopefully you can see this, but the input adapter is labeled with a ground marking. This terminal we're not going to use, and then there's an L and an R. In order to trigger from a relay like this, you want to wire to the ground terminal and the R terminal. So I'm just going to take the other 2 ends of the wires that are going into our relay into NO and common and wire those into R and ground. And again, it doesn't actually matter which one I put in where. We're just closing a circuit. Don't need to worry about polarity or anything like that. All right, so now we have our videos loaded onto our Sprite. We have our wireless trigger wired up and synced to the remote here. We can go ahead and power our video screen back up. You'll see that again, we're playing the looping video, which has no animation. And when we hit our remote, it should trigger our trigger video and play our scare. All right, so that is a quick look at our Sprite video player and our wireless trigger. If you have any questions, of course, you can leave a comment on this video or send us an email at sales@friteprops.com. Thanks.